Good morning, everyone. I'm Arif Rahman. In this very happy occasion, I'd like to deliver my presentation with the topic of language policy in Papua New Guinea. How that I can discuss and deliver to you. Please enjoy this presentation. Papua New Guinea has variety of languages that used for daily communication. English, Hirimoto or Polismoto, Tok Pisin, Papua New Guinean Sign Language, and approximately 850 vernaculars. PNG has a long history in colonialism, and before became an independent country, it was an island in Pacific Ocean. In the western area was colonized by Dutch, whereas in the eastern area there were two colonizers. German was in the half north area used English-based pidgin, or now we call Tok Pisin, and British was in the half south used vernacular-based pidgin or Hirimoto or Polismoto. In addition, the eastern area of New Guinea Island become PNG or Papua New Guinea, and the western area become Indonesian province. In terms of language, as communication tool, PNG has variety of languages. Those are English, Hirimoto, Topisin, sign language, and around 850 vernaculars. English was the only language that had status as official language used in government and education when Papua New Guinea under Australian authority and in the beginning of post-independence, whilst the other languages did not have clear status in spite of they were used for daily communication and lingua franca. Therefore, language planning and policy in Papua New Guinea has changed for decades. Language policy development in PNG. Robert Littoral, 1999, divided PNG language policy into four decades. Those are the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s, and the last is the 1990s. In the 1960s, supermicro policy results in westernizing education system, and English was the only language of initial formal education. In this decade, the foundation of education system in Papua New Guinea was formed by the government, so it is in level 1, that is country. At the time, Papua New Guinea was under the Australian authority, in which English as the official language due to many expatriates was brought into country. They help teaching and developing education in Papua New Guinea. Thus, it also support westernizing process on culture. In addition, this decade was the peak of the foreign westernizing education system in Papua New Guinea. In the period of 1970s, the level of policy was still supra-micro policy, and it resulted 2 points. First one was localizing the foreign system, and the second one was English remained the language of formal education, and at some vernaculars were permitted to use in educational system. The authority for education remains centralized and top-down, but moved from Australian authority to Papua New Guinea government because at the time Papua New Guinea has got their own independence from Australia. It was 1975. Education system that they got from colonizer was localized or to be localization. One effort was the draft 1976 to 80 or 5 years education plan include basic vernacular education had been proposed, but it was rejected by the National Executive Council. Therefore, English remained the language for formal education. However, some vernaculars were permitted to explain the concepts. As a matter of fact, Tok-Pisin as the New Guinea pidgin was used extensively in this decade. Even in University of Papua New Guinea, another pidgin that is Hirimotu or Polismotu was also added as subject in language department. In the 1980s period, the level of policy became macro and micro policy, and it had 2 points. First one is indigenous adaptation, and the second one is village stock place schools or vernacular preschools. In this decade, the process of decentralized, grassroots oriented policy making about early education expanded. The decision makers were provincial and community leaders. The main focus was on local language for literacy for children. It tried to implement in some subjects at schools, such as math, science, health, and social. Some provinces and large communities had applied the vernacular preschools or village stock play schools. These provinces were North Solomon in 1980, East New Britain in 1983, Enga Province in 1985, and large communities like Angor in 1981, Getsap in 1983, Mishima and Barai in 1984. What decision made by provincial and communities leader influenced Papua New Guinea government, even though in 1986 the parliament rejected what philosophy of education committee recommended that the first 3 years of education was in vernacular. However, in 1988 the parliament included funds and in the 1989 provide budget for the National Department of Education for a section on vernacular and literacy, plus funds to assist with training and materials. In addition, a literacy and awareness program that specified that children should learn to read and write their own language, providing the highest level of approval to initial literacy in the vernacular. Nevertheless, the challenge then was to implement this policy and make the advantages of vernacular education available to all communities. In the period of 1990s, the level of policy became supra-macro policy, and then it had 2 points. The first one is education system reform. The Papua New Guinea government tried starting to form the level of education in elementary, primary, and secondary. And the second one is indigenous development. This decade has seen the initial stages of an education reform that include that introduction of a new initial education level within formal education, or it is called elementary education, preschools until grade 2, primary school grade 3 until 8, and secondary school grade 9 until 12. Vernacular has more status in formal education due to it introduced from preparatory until grade 2. However, some issues appear such as new infrastructure, teacher training system, and curriculum development. This process can be viewed as the formalization of vernacular education, or literal call it is as indigenous development. This decade also include introducing a village-based 3-year vernacular level or preschools and grades 1 and 2, community school level grades 3 to 8, and secondary grades 9 until 12 available in each province. However, with about 850 vernaculars, PNG has a big challenge to implement this policy by expanding it to all languages desiring it, and to develop professional formal education in vernacular that retains community control and does not become bureaucratized. From those 4 decades that was mentioned by littoral in 1999, we can see that there are three levels of policy implementation in Papua New Guinea. The first one is national, second one is provincial, and the third one is community. In the level of national, Papua New Guinea government has responsibilities in the areas of funding, high-level training, subsidies to programs and research. And for provincial level, provincial leaders have responsibilities in the areas of administration, funding, training for teachers, materials production, and also in research. And the last level is community. Community was responsible for the choice of language, or they should determine what language they will choose to develop, and recommending those who would receive training, providing buildings or places, and the last is providing teacher salaries. Even though vernacular has got the same status like English in educational system, however, always there are some issues in vernacular education, and Faisal in 1985 proposed some questions regarding issues of vernacular education. Those are: is it possible? Does it work? And the last is it worth it? The first question, the answer is clearly no. With about 850 languages, Papua New Guinea can be considered as category of linguistically diverse. However, with assistance of language community, Papua New Guinea government succeeded to operate a program in over 250 languages in 1993. And the second question, to answer the second question, the Papua New Guinea teachers and inspectors compared the two groups, those who start education in English and those who were with mother tongue. And the result, according to literal article, those who start using vernacular in preparatory schools showed better scores on grade 6 exams than those who started education in English. And is it worth it? It is comparison of cost spent and the advantages accepted, which is the community can maintain their local languages as the cultural wealth. And Faisal concludes that the use of vernaculars in education in the majority of the countries of the world is quite simply outside the realm of the possible. And Faisal also suggests some criteria for choosing an indigenous language. First, language of wider communication. So, the vernacular is used by wider society. And second one, number of speakers are 10% of population. And the third one, there is a language development. And the fourth one, there is group preferences. And the last drop out of the factor. Finally, from those previous slides, we can get many information, and now we can conclude some points from those previous slides. The first one, variety language used in Papua New Guinea, which is the Papua New Guineans people have many languages that they use for daily communication or a communication tool. And the second one, language policy development, which is Robert Littoral in 1999. He has developed for decades of language policy development in Papua New Guinea. Those are in 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And the third one, level of policy implementation, and we can see there are three levels of policy implementation in Papua New Guinea. Start from national, provincial, And the last is community. And the last conclusion, always there are some issues regarding of vernacular education. Is it possible? Does it work? And is it worth it for doing vernacular education?